Welcome to In the Reads, the podcast of San Jose State University's Read Magazine, California's oldest literary journal. This episode, Read Magazine interviews author Ingrid Rojas Contreras, profiled in Read Magazine's 2025 issue. Ingrid Rojas Contreras was born and raised in Bogota, Colombia. Her memoir, The Man Who Could Move Clouds, is a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize, the National Book Award, and the National Book Critics Circle Award, and a winner of the California Book Award. Her first novel, Fruit of the Drunken Tree, was the silver medal winner in First Fiction from the California Book Awards and a New York Times Editor's Choice. Her essays and short stories have appeared in the New York Times Magazine, The Cut, and Ziziva. Rojas Contreras has received numerous awards and fellowships from Breadloaf Writers Conference, VONA, Hedgebrook, the Camargo Foundation, and the National Association of Latino Arts and Culture. She is a visiting writer at St. Mary's College and lives in California. Here's a summary of The Man Who Could Move Clouds. For Ingrid Rojas Contreras, magic runs in the family. Raised among the political violence of the 1980s and 90s Colombia, in a house where "What did you dream?" was the preferred greeting in place of "How are you?" very little was out of the ordinary. Her maternal grandfather, Nono, was a renowned curandero, a community healer gifted with what the family called the secrets, the power to talk to the dead, tell the future, treat the sick, and move the clouds. So when Rojas Contreras, now living in the United States, suffered a head injury in her 20s that left her with amnesia, an accident eerily similar to a fall her mother took as a child, from which she woke not just with amnesia but also the ability to see ghosts. The family assumed the secrets had been passed down once again. Interweaving family stories more enchanting than those in any novel, resurrected Colombian history, and her own deeply personal reckonings with the bounds of reality, Rojas Contreras writes her way through the incomprehensible and into her inheritance. The result is a luminous testament to the power of storytelling as a healing art and an invitation to embrace the extraordinary. Let's listen to her interview with Read Magazine's managing editor, Bekah Lazar, in November 2024.
Okay, cool. Hi. I've actually never done this before. I've never interviewed anyone before, so this is my first time doing that.
Exciting. I'm very honored to be your first person.
Oh my god, of course. I actually I read your book. Well, I listened to it because I love audiobooks. But I listened to your memoir because my thesis advisor actually recommended it to me, Keenan Norris. And he was like, "You'd really enjoy it," because I'm writing my thesis about it's a fiction book. Also about mythology stuff, because my family also has roots in kind of I don't really like the word witchcraft, but kind of brujeria. Yeah, it was a great read. I really, really enjoyed it. But yeah, I just had a couple questions for you, if that's cool.
Yeah.
So my first question, I really wanted to know, when writing your memoir, which was nonfiction, so where do you draw the line between speculation and fact? Because regarding your Nono, am I pronouncing that right? Okay, yeah. Your Nono's life, who you never met, how do you navigate writing about the life of somebody that you were never able to directly interview? And I'm asking this because I'm taking a nonfiction class right now, which is so much fun. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on the line between writing about situations that you personally didn't experience, because I would also write about my own family and my mom and her mom and their kind of experiences, but it's difficult for me personally to kind of accurately speculate what their lives were like. So I wanted to know your thoughts on that.
I think that for myself, everything that is in the book is grounded in somebody's truth, right? So I think that there's for things that we weren't there for, then I feel that an interview where somebody was there for that time, you're just basically kind of quoting what they say, And for myself, I do a lot of multiple interviews about the same subject. And I think because with the memoir and its family, it's like an accumulation of interviewing over time. That would have probably, since childhood, I've like heard stories about him. So I think like family things are different, but, just as, if you were going to recreate something that you weren't there for, like you would go to kind of like, check out the weather database and like see what the weather was. And you might, go to somebody's memory and ask like, what do you remember this look like? And I think it's interesting because if we were writing memoir about something that we like witnessed ourselves, that memory of what things look like, or like what, the sounds or like the smells or the texture of a place, is no more exact than somebody else's memory of what something was in a time. But I think for memoir, I think it's important to sort of let the reader what the limitations are in the piece, and then the reader can just kind of make assumptions of like where the information kind of came from.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. I loved like reading about just like his life and like your mother's life, and especially what was so visceral to me was the like her falling down the well, like the well. Oh my God, just like so beautifully written. I also wanted to ask about that. Like, this is such a general question, and I'm sure like writers like hate hearing about this, but like, how did you personally come to develop your own style, like writing style? Because your writing style is gorgeous. I was like captivated the whole time.
Yeah. Like my writing style, English is my second language, and so I think that part of the style is that I am often thinking in Spanish and then sometimes translating word for word what the Spanish thought is, but making it into English, or like just interchanging the words. So sometimes I feel like that creates a different sort of poetry, and I've always just been really interested in the way that language carries culture, and there's all sorts of sayings that we have in Colombia that I think are very beautiful, that I just kind of even just say, in my regular life, even if people don't know what I'm talking about. It's, like one of the ones that we have is when somebody takes advantage of you, you say like, like I gave him my hand, but he took my elbow. So I might just drop that into conversation, like telling you a story about somebody who I felt like took more than I was offering. Like I might just say like, I gave him my hand and he took my elbow.
That's so good.
So I think that there's a value with sort of keeping one foot in the culture that you're from, even though of course we're constantly changing and we're being changed by the place that we make a home in. And so I think that I often like read a lot of books in Spanish as well. And so I think that I just have I think that that's my process. And whenever I'm writing and I'm like taking care of language, I often have the Oxford English Dictionary open, but I also have a bunch of like etymology, but for words in Spanish, and then etymology for like words in English, and just a Spanish dictionary open. And I'm just constantly doing this thing where I'm traveling back and forth. And sometimes that makes me arrive at phrasings or at words that I wouldn't have normally kind of like reached for. And I think it's also just very, very intuitive. So I'm just trying to be, fluidly in one language and then the other, and then seeing what happens. Um, because there's always something that is lost in translation when I move back and forth. And the more that you sort of do that, then just something strange starts to happen, which I really like.
That's so lovely. Yeah, I'm not fluent in Tagalog, but my mom's first language is Tagalog. My dad's first language is German. And they always talk about, like, oh, like, you get stuff mixed up, like, really easily. And I always ask them, like, what language do you think in? And they're like, I don't know. But, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have, like, some history, some roots in the Bay Area, right? Yeah, because I know that's what Keenan told me, which is why he recommended your work to me. I guess another question I have is, like, how has the Bay Area or like the Bay Area writing community, how has it influenced or affected your writing, if at all? Because I would love to know more about, like, your history with writing in the Bay Area, especially.
Yeah, I mean, I came here probably in my late 20s, or late 20s. And yeah, I think I used to live in Chicago before, and Chicago and the Bay Area are, like, the only two places that I've lived in the United States. Yeah, I think the Bay Area is such a wonderful place because there's so many different artists from all sorts of different communities, and more so than Chicago, there's an awareness, or there's an effort to figure out what cross-pollination looks like, or, like, what, like, a cross-conversation looks like, or just, I don't know, there's, like, it feels like there's a culture of inclusivity that I really like and have really kind of enjoyed. And I feel like I met my best writing friends who are, who live here, and I feel like their work has, I don't know, like, there's, sometimes when you, like, make a really good friend and they're, like, a writer, and you're sort of walking that path together, there's something so inspiring about seeing the things that they publish and put out, and also kind of being privy to the private conversation of what happens in the back scenes of writing that piece. Yeah, so I feel like I've been very kind of fed and nurtured by, like, my writer relationships here.
I feel the same way, like, especially going to school here. I've, like, met so many, like, wonderful friends and, like, professors, and it just feels like a very enriching environment. Yeah. I guess kind of connected to that, but do you have any authors that you're, like, heavily influenced by, if any?
Probably I would say, like, one of the writers that I, like, return to a lot would be Franz Kafka. And I just find, like, his journals are, like, hilarious, but they're
I know. They're so funny.
They're so beautiful. I am really just a fan of his, his really short fiction, which is, like, a page long, or, I don't know if you've read those, but they're in the collected fictions. And those, like, really short, weird stories are just, I don't know, among my favorite.
I agree. Like, I reread The Metamorphosis recently. Crazy ass, like, like, short story. Just the first sentence, like, made me laugh so hard. It was like, one day Gregor woke up and he was a disgusting, foul vermin. And I was like, oh my God. His journals are so funny too. Like, he's never had a good day in his life. Like, it's crazy. I
really love his writing. I think that there's, like, a level of vulnerability and darkness that he seems to always just sort of, like, carry with him. And I just love how strange it all is. It just makes me laugh.
What are your, like, top 3 favorites, so that I know to read them?
Of the shorts?
Yeah.
There's one that I love that's, I think it's Prometheus. It's, like, a retelling of Prometheus, which is really great.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a really strange short that's called like The Helmsman, which is just about, the whole piece is just this guy on a boat being like, am I not the helmsman here? And like all of the workers are like, no, you're not. Like so strange and compact, and I just like love them. They're like completely I don't know, they have like that delicious like sense of irony, and they're like really short, and they're so strange, and they're almost like Prometheus is like a retelling, but it just kind of gravitates toward like a philosophical reimagining about what it means to be alive. I don't know, it's just wonderful.
I'm gonna have to read that, because like I've only really read The Metamorphosis, which is like, I have kind of a funny history with it, because like whenever people talk about their dads, they're always like, oh, my dad like introduced me to like classic rock and like all this stuff, and I'm like, damn, my dad was reading me Kafka when I was like 7 years old.
Wow. Was he reading to you The Metamorphosis?
Yeah. I was like 7 or 8. I don't know why he did that. But I think so also, because I reread it for my thesis or like my MFA exam, and it was like the funniest thing ever to me, because it's so like deplorably sad at the end too. I mean, I guess all of his stuff is, but like they just kind of left him there to die. Like that's so messed up.
Yeah.
Like,
I know, he's very dark. I don't know, but there's like a truth. There's also like this humor to it at the same time.
yeah.
I think that's my favorite things about Kafka is just how dark he can go, and then the moments of humor and lightness that he finds in that place are just kind of like astounding. I just find it like, just delightful.
How do you feel like he's how do you feel he's influenced your work, if at all?
I think that it's just, I always kind of feel like, I don't know, like maybe Kafka is like I kind of like the way that I feel about him is maybe that he was like my, like older cool brother that you like always want to emulate or something. I sort of feel that way about him. I went to Prague 1 year and like visited you can do like a whole Kafka tour, and there's like a Kafka museum, and they have like an exhibition of like his little drawings. So I'm like completely, like very much like nerded out when I was over there.
Wait, that's so fun.
Yeah.
What the heck? I want to do that in my life.
Yeah, you could stay. There's I think like his office that was in the whatever building that he was in is now a hotel, and you can stay like specifically in like that room.
Oh my god, I know what I'm doing once I have money. What the hell? That's so neat.
Yeah.
God, that's so cool. What's another question? Oh, another kind of related question that I personally wanted to know, because I'm at SGSU right now, and I'm in like a multi-genre program, which is like so fun and so cool. And so I'm taking like a nonfiction class and a fiction class and a poetry class, and we get to like study everything, and it's so wonderful. So I know you've also written fiction and also nonfiction, so I wanted to know, like, how do your works inform each other at all? And like when you're writing nonfiction, do you allow fiction to influence that writing, or reverse, or what's up?
Yeah. And like when I'm teaching, and I think even in my reading, and I always really like, if I'm writing fiction, I like to be reading nonfiction, and vice versa. And even when I'm teaching one genre, I really like bringing other genres into like the reading list, just because I think that there's so much that we can learn from other genres and apply it in the wrong genre. Like what can nonfiction like learn from fiction, or what can nonfiction read from poetry? I think that those questions are so exciting for my own work.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm constantly kind of going back and forth. For me, nonfiction is a problem of limitation. You're like limited to the material that you have in front of you. You're limited to the things that you can discover and uncover. And with fiction, it's a problem of it being limitless, right? Like you can imagine everything in the world when you start a short story or novel. It can go 1,000 different ways. And so it's always the problem of like, out of all of those ways, like which one is the correct one for the story that you're telling. So I really kind of enjoy being in the practice of those two problems. I really kind of enjoy what they each feel like, and they feel very different to me. I think I'm always like, when I'm doing fiction, I will always do a lot of research anyway. So I'm not, I do an amount of research as if I were, like reporting on a hard journalism piece. Like I will read articles, and I will like do interviews, and I will like travel places, and I will like read books and gather facts and just sort of look for oral histories and just kind of go. I just really love the research aspect of it. But this is what I mean, like the things that fiction can learn from nonfiction is kind of like that level of finding inspiration out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like the work being ignited by like real things, which then don't have to kind of stay real once they kind of, become part of the fiction. And for like nonfiction, I think that I find it like very kind of inspiring to be either reading poetry or fiction at that time, and just kind of like think about the inventiveness of the sentence. There's like so much that can be carried just by the way that you're phrasing something.
Yeah.
So, I'm really like straddling a lot of genres, like when I'm writing, even though I'm saying, I stay true to the rules of nonfiction. I'm like, everything has to be kind of like true and rooted in fact. And if but if I'm in fiction, I'm like, I sort of want it to be rooted in truth and anyway. So.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, especially with like because, well, not to talk about myself, but one reason why Keenan especially recommended your work is because what I'm writing right now, my thesis is about like Filipino mythology and like and like kind of pulling from all these historical aspects. So it's still like it's a fiction piece, but there's still a lot of research that has to be done regarding like pre-colonial practices. And that stuff is like really hard to find because like it's just been like wiped because like the Spanish fucked us up so bad. Excuse my French, but it's really interesting to hear you talk about that because like you're right, like other genres do very much influence everyone else's work, and like I think the research aspect for fiction is very like it is a lot of fun. Like it's so much fun.
Yeah. And I think it's, it's like something, totally different, which I encountered in my own like nonfiction with the memoir, which is how do you write, nonfiction out of erasure, right? Like when there has been like all of this history that's lost, and there hasn't been documentation because powers that be were not interested in documenting the culture and were interested in suppressing the culture. So where do you go? And I think that that's a really interesting question for nonfiction. And I think that that's where it just becomes very interesting, or that's where the research for the memoir became really interesting, because I couldn't find the kind of the trove of data that we all kind of like wished was there.
Yeah.
And then instead, what I found is that, like when it comes to curandero practices, which we like went underground because they were, historically persecuted, then the people holding knowledge are actually, that's one of the only resources that there are.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so then, yeah, talking to people and kind of like thinking of that as another form of like research becomes very, very important in that sense.
Yeah, I remember at the beginning of your memoir, you mentioned like not wanting, well, you wanted to write it, but then your mom was like, don't write it, and then she had a dream, and then she's like, yeah, you should write it now. Which is so funny because my family is the same way. Like, they're so dream oriented. My mom will be like, oh, your Lola visited me last night, we're gonna go visit her today because she wants to say hi. It's really cute. But I wanted to know, like, what were those interviews with your family like
in the beginning?
Yeah,
like when I was deciding whether to write it or not write it.
Well, yes, that, and also like when gathering information.
Gathering information.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I always knew that I wanted to write about my grandfather, and I just didn't know what form it was going to take. So anytime that, like we were gathered together and as a family and a story of his came up, I was always kind of listening with a writer ear. But it wasn't until that year when my like mom and my two aunts had that dream about him being like, I want to be disinterred, that triggered all of the happenings in the book. It wasn't until that dream happened that I knew that this specifically was the story of the book. So it was only in that moment when I was like, we're living in a book. This is a book. And so, yeah, I think, like that was sort of like the first time that I was back with family, and I was kind of actively saying, this is a book that I want to write. And I think that, one of the things that I noticed in the beginning, of course, this always happens, is that there's always like some level of fear and trepidation, and I think that's smart and correct, because it is kind of scary to open your life out to the world, right?
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen. And so we just kind of like had conversations about, like, what is it that you're nervous about, or what is the anxiety, like what is the worst thing that can happen, what are the things that can happen, and how do we kind of or how do I on my end take care of things so that outcome doesn't happen. So there was a lot of like those types of negotiations. And then I kind of like noticed, initially I just wanted to record, and my plan was just that I was just going to have a lot of transcriptions. And it was this funny thing, but I think this happens a lot too, especially if you're in a community where you're like trying to talk to a lot of people at once, or like it's a family gathering. The moment that a recording device comes out, everybody just sort of like freezes. It's almost like in the room.
Yeah.
To it. So very quickly I tried to like hide it. I didn't see it, but
I do that too.
So that was kind of what I did in the end. And I was also doing things, sometimes I didn't have the recording device on me, and I would just hear like the story in full, and as soon as it was over, I would go and like write down everything that I remember like very quickly. So it's interesting because especially with like family stories, you're so used to just being in that air of, I'm just hanging out with family and we're just telling fun stories, and this is so delightful and warm. And the moment that you decide that this is something that you're writing about, you're like working.
Yeah.
So that changes very quickly, and you're trying to listen for language, and you're trying to pay attention to, or at least I am, to gestures that I want to remember, and I'm just kind of like being very observant about what's happening. So it's a different sort of listening, which is kind of like a higher, more attentive listening than I do in my regular life.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, because like I feel very similarly, because like I'm also trying to get information from my family about, like, what I'm working on is, like, a fiction thing, but, like, a lot of it is inspired by my family, so I'm, like, trying to, like, hide my phone with, like, my little recording device and be like, what were your guys' lives like in the provinces? Like, trying to be, like, subtle about it. So yeah, I see like why Keenan told me to talk to you, because it feels very relevant.
Oh, great.
Okay, I don't want to take up too much of your time because we're almost at like 30 minutes, but thank you so much. One last quick question. This is just like for me personally, because I'm selfish. Yeah. What's like, because you teach, right? You're a professor. Yeah. So what's like your favorite part about teaching writing well, not specifically, just like general?
I think my favorite thing about teaching writing, I have many favorite things. Like one thing is that when you're teaching, you get to revisit texts that you love, and you get to sort of, because you have to break them down for somebody else, potentially, you have to, go back to them, and really study them and really be able to take them apart and put them back together. And there's so much that I've learned about how writing works through just that exercise of teaching. And I would say this might be my favorite thing, but when I'm teaching, I always kind of call the workshop a lab space. And I'm always encouraging experimentation, and I'm always coming up with strange prompts for us to do, or like strange exercises for us to do. And, I come up with I'm like, oh yeah, wouldn't it be weird delightful if I got everyone to do this very strange exercise with me, and then I'll do it with them, so we're all doing it together. So I feel like it just kind of invites a level of playfulness into my process, that I don't know I would be disciplined enough to do on my own. But that feeling that you get about, from like just being an artist in a room of other artists, and you're just kind of playing around.
It's just like fun.
Yeah, I love that feeling.
I agree. Like, I love being in my writing program. I think it's so much fun. I'm going to be so sad when I inevitably have to graduate. Yeah. But sorry, I said last one, but this is just like, again, for me, do you have like a workshop structure that you like?
I do, yeah. So what I say is we like center the author, and we center like whatever the author's vision is. And so for any piece, I tell like the rest of the workshop that we're all kind of like decentering ourselves. And what that means is that we're sort of trying to collude with the author to try to kind of help them achieve the thing that they want to achieve. So then we're looking at the manuscript, and then looking, where does this kind of like align with what you said you wanted, and where does it kind of wander away? And sometimes we have to have that conversation of, maybe like it seems like the work wants to be something else, which is not what you're saying, and like let's talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we usually like the writer will do like an artist statement about the piece that they're turning in, and that's how we like know what the vision is. Whoa,
that's so cool. I've like never heard of that before. Yeah, that's so neat.
What do you do in your program?
It kind of depends. Like, for my nonfiction workshop at least, we either have like a option to lead our own workshop, so like just kind of come with your own questions, which is what I usually choose to do, or like have our professor lead, who's like he's great, he does a great job, but I know that like in my time, in my graduate and my undergraduate, I guess, career, I have done a lot of like Iowa style workshops, and like I don't know if I don't know if I rock with that, honestly.
No, I mean, personally, I think the politics of it are wrong.
Yeah.
I think it's problematic because it doesn't seem to me like the power in a room is going to be the same.
Yeah.
So in the moment that you have a person of color or like another minority writer who is being critiqued, and then you have everybody else talking about their work, there's a chance where the conversation can just wander into, I don't know, a problematic space, and if the author can't say anything, then that's just what their feedback is.
Yeah.
But I also think that that's a model where the audience is being centered, and I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to me.
No, it doesn't. Right? It doesn't sit right with me either.
Yeah, because I think like with workshop, and maybe there's like an assumption with the Iowa model that like the piece is finished, but if we're like in an MFA program and I feel like every piece is actually in transition, or it's being imagined currently, or there's like potential for it to be reimagined, and so then for that reason I feel like it's more useful to center the author as opposed to like center the audience.
Yeah.
And the other problem is that you could have somebody who's really into romance and is like, this story needs to have like, where's the love interest? I'm not engaged. Another person is like, I felt like there was no action, because maybe they're like a very plot-driven person. Do you know what I mean? And so there's like a way in which taste starts to lead the conversation, and I just don't think that's useful feedback.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I keep saying that, but like, I do. Like, yeah, people tend to just like have their own taste, and that's completely fine. But for me personally, like, once it starts to leak into your workshop feedback, it just becomes a little unhelpful. Yeah,
it's just like beside the point. Like, everybody's taste is great and important, but it's just beside the point when it comes to feedback. Yeah,
because with a lot of pieces I read, I'm like, oh, this, like, I don't feel like I can give you productive feedback, because it's just like I don't know, I don't really read or write romance stuff, and so when someone brings that to the table, I feel bad. I'm like, I don't know how to help you. Like, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking. This was so fun.
Thanks.
I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, you're so welcome. This was very delightful.
Find more about Ingrid Rojas Contreras at www.ingridrojascontreras.com, IngridRojasContreras.com. Thanks to our guest, Ingrid Rojas Contreras. This has been In the Reads, the podcast of San Jose State University's Read Magazine, California's oldest literary journal. Find us online at readmag.org. Thanks for listening.